Hi guys, today we're going to be reading chapter 3 of The Thief of Always. So I wanted to go over some vocabulary for you before we get started. The first word is boasted. When someone's boasting, they're bragging or showing off. The second word is weather vane, and I put this picture because it's easier to just show you a picture. You might have seen what a weather vane looks like. Next word is famished, which means very hungry. Mournful is feeling sadness. Melancholy is another word for sadness or sorrow. Astonished is very surprised. And discomfited means to feel uneasy. So let's get started on chapter 3. So, where we left off, Harvey and Rictus were just entering the holiday house. So, this chapter is called The Pleasure and the Worm. What a fine thing it would be, Harvey thought, to build a place like this, to drive its foundations deep into the earth, to lay its floors and hoist its walls, to say, where there was nothing, I raised a house. That would be a very fine thing. It wasn't a puffed up peacock of a place either. There were no marble steps, no fluted columns. It was a proud house, certainly, but there was nothing wrong with that. It had much to be proud of. It stood 4 stories high and boasted more windows than Harvey could readily count. Its porch was wide, as were the steps that led up to its carved door. Its slated roofs were steep and crowned with magnificent chimneys and lightning rods. Its highest point, however, was neither a chimney nor a lightning rod, but a large and elaborately wrought weather vane, which Harvey was peering up at when he heard the front door open and a voice say, excuse me, Harvey Swick, as I live and breathe. He looked down, the weather vane's white silhouette still behind his eyes, and there on the porch stood a woman who made his grandmother, the oldest person he knew, look young. She had a face like a rolled up ball of cobwebs, from which her hair, which could have also been spider's work, fell in wispy abundance. Her eyes were tiny, her mouth tight, her hands gnarled. Her voice, however, was melodious, and its words welcoming. I thought maybe you'd decided not to come, she said, picking up a basket of freshly cut flowers she'd left on the step, which would have been a pity. Come on in. There's food on the table. You must be famished. I can't stay long, Harvey said. You can do whatever you wish, came the reply. I'm Mrs. Griffin, by the way. Yes, Rictus mentioned you. I hope he didn't bend your ear too much. He loves the sound of his own voice, that and his reflection. Harvey had climbed the porch steps by now and stopped in front of the open door. This was a moment of decision, he knew, though he wasn't quite sure why. Step inside, Miss Griffin said, brushing a spider hair back from her furrowed brow. But Harvey still hesitated, and he might have turned round and never stepped inside the house, except that he heard a boy's voice yelling, I gotcha, followed by uproarious laughter. Wendell, Mrs. Griffin said, are you chasing the cats again? The sound of laughter grew even louder, and it was so full of good humor that Harvey stepped over the threshold and into the house just so that he could see the face of its owner. He only got a brief look. A goofy, bespectacled face, that means wearing glasses, appeared for a moment at the other end of the hallway. Then a piebald cat dashed between the boy's legs, and he was off after it, yelling and laughing again. He's such a crazy boy, Mrs. Griffin said, but all the cats love him. The house was more wonderful inside than out. Even on the short journey to the kitchen, Harvey glimpsed enough to know that this was a place built for games, chases, and adventures. It was a maze in which no 2 doors were alike. It was a treasure house where some notorious pirate had hidden his blood-stained booty. It was a resting place for carpets flown by djinns and boxes sealed before the flood, where the eggs of beasts that the earth had lost were trapped and waiting for the sun's heat to hatch them. This is a little confusing, but what Harvey's just saying is that the house seems really royal and magical and grand. It's perfect, Harvey murmured to himself. Mrs. Griffin caught his words. Nothing's perfect, she replied. Why not? Because time passes, she went on, staring down at the flowers she'd cut. And the beetle and the worm find their way into everything sooner or later. Hearing this, Harvey wondered what grief it was Mrs. Griffin had known or seen to make her so mournful. I'm sorry, she said, covering her melancholy with a tiny smile. You didn't come here to listen to my dirges. You came to enjoy yourself, didn't you? So I'm just going to stop there for a second. It seems like Miss Griffin has something on her mind that's making her sad, making her upset. I'm wondering, and you guys probably are too, what this might be. So let's keep that in mind as we keep reading. So let's pick up here. You came to enjoy yourself, didn't you? I suppose I did, Harvey said. So let me tempt you with some treats. Harvey sat himself down at the kitchen table, and within 60 seconds, Mrs. Griffin had set a dozen plates of food in front of him. Hamburgers, hot dogs, and fried chicken, mounds of buttered potatoes, apple, cherry, and chocolate pies, ice cream and whipped cream, grapes, tangerines, and a plate of fruits he couldn't even name. He set to eating with gusto and was devouring his second slice of pie when a freckled girl with long, frizzy blonde hair and huge blue-green eyes ambled in. You must be Harvey said. How did you know? Wendell told me. How did he know? She shrugged. He just heard. I'm Lulu, by the way. Did you just arrive? No, I've been here ages. Longer than Wendell, but not as long as Mrs. Griffin. No one's been here as long as she has. Isn't that right? Almost, said Mrs. Griffin, a little mysteriously. Do you want something to eat, sweetie? Lulu shook her head. No, thanks. I haven't got much of an appetite at the moment. She nevertheless sat down opposite Harvey, stuck her thumb in the chocolate pie, and licked it clean. Who invited you here? She asked. A man called Rictus. Oh, yes, the one with the grin? That's him. He's got a sister and two brothers, she went on. You met them then? Not all of them, Lulu admitted. They keep themselves to themselves, but you'll meet one or two of them sooner or later. I don't think I'll be staying, Harvey said. I mean, my mom and dad don't even know I'm here. Of course they do, Lulu replied. They just didn't tell you about it, sorry. This confused Harvey, and he said so. Call your mom and dad, Lulu suggested. Ask them. Can I do that? He wondered. Of course you can, Mrs. Griffin replied. The phone's in the hallway. Carrying a spoonful of ice cream with him, Harvey went to the phone and dialed. At first, there was a whining sound on the line, as though a wind was in the wires. Then, as it cleared, he heard his mom say, Who's this? Before you start yelling, he began. Oh, hello, dear, his mom cooed. Have you arrived? Arrived? You are at the holiday house, I hope. Yes, I am, but... Oh, good. I was worried in case you'd lost your way. Do you like it there? You knew I was coming, Harvey said, catching Lulu's eye. I told you, she mouthed. Of course we knew, his mom went on. We invited Mr. Rictus to show you the place. You looked so sad, you poor lamb. We thought you needed a little fun. Really? Said Harvey, astonished by this turn of events. We just want you to enjoy yourself, his mom went on, so you can stay just as long as you want. What about school? He said. You deserve a little time off, came the reply. Don't you worry about anything. Just have a good time. I will, Mom. Bye, dear. Bye. So that's a little surprising that Harvey's parents arranged for this to happen, for him to get this break. Harvey came away from the conversation shaking his head in amazement. You're right, he said to Lulu. They arranged everything. So now you don't have to feel guilty, said Lulu. Well, I expect I'll see you around later, huh? And with that, she ambled away. If you've finished eating, Mrs. Griffin said, I'll show you to your room. I'd like that. She duly led Harvey up the stairs. At the half landing, basking on the sun-drenched windowsill, was a cat with fur the color of a cloudless sky. That's Blue Cat, Mrs. Griffin said. You saw Stew Cat playing with Wendell. I don't know where Clue Cat is, but he'll find you. He likes new guests. Do you have a lot of people coming here? Only children, very special children, like you and Lulu and Wendell. Mr. Hood won't just have anybody. Who's Mr. Hood? The man who built the holiday house, Mrs. Griffin replied. Will I meet him too? Mrs. Griffin looked discomfited by the question. Remember that discomfited means like uncomfortable. So that's strange that the man who built the holiday house, when Harvey asked, like, am I going to meet him? Miss Griffin seems uncomfortable by that. Maybe, she said, her gaze averted. So her gaze averted means she's staring off and not looking at Harvey. But he's a very private man. They were up on the landing now, and Mrs. Griffin led Harvey past a row of painted portraits to a room at the back of the house. It overlooked an orchard, and the warm air carried the smell of ripe apples into the room. You look tired, my sweet, Mrs. Griffin said. Maybe you should lie down for a little while. Harvey usually hated to sleep in the afternoon. It reminded him too much of having the flu or the measles, but the pillow looked very cool and comfortable, and when Mrs. Griffin had taken her leave, he decided to lie down just for a few minutes. Either he was more tired than he thought, or the calm and comfort of the house rocked him into a slumber. Whichever, his eyes closed almost as soon as he put his head on the pillow, and they did not open again until morning. And then there's some of these creepy illustrations that are starting to show us that maybe not everything is what it seems, because, Harvey describes the house as being grand and magical and almost royal. But then we see hints of, especially from Mrs. Griffin, that things are not as great as they seem to be. So what you're going to do today is answer 2 short response questions. I'd really like you not only to answer with an inference and go back to the text and include specific details to explain why you think that. Really push yourself to write complete sentences, because you guys have the inferences down. You just need to make sure that you're including evidence to support your inferences from the text. So let's go over the 2 discussion questions so that you are ready for your task. So the first one, why do you think Harvey hesitates before entering the house for the first time? So you can go back into the chapter. Remember that the full text of the chapter is uploaded without the video. Think, why is he hesitating before he enters the house? What could be going through his head? And then the second one, interpret or make meaning of Mrs. Griffin's quote. This is what she says. Nothing's perfect. Time passes, and the beetle and the worm find their way into everything sooner or later. What could she be trying to tell Harvey here? So Harvey's trying to say, like, oh, this house is perfect. Everything's amazing. And she picks up on that and then says this to him. So what do you think that she's trying to tell him? Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed this chapter. Good luck on your responses. You're going to do great. Bye.